Happy Monday. This is the Mental Breakdown. I'm your host, Joey Velez. Hope everybody had a nice, wonderful weekend and they're getting ready to start their next work week, school week, whatever that is. Getting ready to start it off on the right foot. We got another 5 days ahead of us. Let's make today great and do what we can to set ourselves up for the tomorrow and the rest of the week. Um, One thing that I am grateful for is quality time. One thing I've learned about myself, if we're looking at love languages, is one of my top is quality time. I like spending quality time with the loved ones, with the people I care about the most, and it doesn't have to be doing anything spectacular. It could just be the small things. So for example, this weekend I got a chance to go over to my girlfriend's house and me, her, and her daughter, we all had a nice little breakfast together. Once we had breakfast, then we followed that up with, setting up her house with Christmas decorations. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm the one to decorate my house with Christmas the day after Halloween, uh, but I still enjoyed making that house look pretty because I know it was something that she enjoyed. But then we even followed that up with going to her daughter's soccer game. She's 4 years old. So it's just a bunch of kids just huddled around a ball, uh, playing defense on everybody, no matter who has it. So it's a fun thing to watch. But I think it's just smaller moments like that that I really get to that I really appreciate because sometimes they don't happen often, and sometimes we overlook them. So I think one thing is for you if you're out there, maximizing your time with the people you love, people you care about, and just really basking in those moments, really being present to really kind of fully enjoy that experience for whatever it is that you're doing. Um, One thing that I've heard of a lot, and I think people know what I'm talking about when I say the term white lies. Uh, People, including myself, like to tell white lies. So what does that actually mean? So if we had to look at a definition of what a white lie actually is, it's a small or harmless lie told to avoid hurting somebody's feelings or to make things a little bit easier. For example, let's say you're at a friend's house, right? They cook you some food, and they tell you it tastes great, when in reality it kind of tasted like crap. Or somebody's got a new outfit on, and they're saying like, "How do you like my fit?" And you're like, "Oh man, that looks fresh, dude. You're looking good." But in reality, like, God, this person looks hideous. You know. So I think in these moments, the statements we make, they're well intended, right? They're to protect, someone's emotions, maybe even to protect your own emotions, but in reality, even sometimes these moments still lead to more harm than good. Now, why do people even tell white lies in the first place? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. A couple of different reasons. I think one is the fear of disappointing others. We don't want to look a certain way in the face of others by telling the truth, so we would rather lie to kind of protect that as opposed to being more deliberate about deceiving somebody. It's more so we don't look a certain way. I think there's also fear of conflict. So having this more like keep the peace mentality. Maybe this stems from not knowing how to have tough conversations. Um, it could also be a habit that they learned. Research tells us that I want to say it's as early as four, we learn behaviors from the environment we're in, from the people around, how we're raised, things like that. And that's going to drastically impact how we handle certain situations. But I think part of it is, maybe I've had experience of telling the truth and getting judged for it. So what that may do is maybe that leads to telling these white lies more as like a defense mechanism so we can avoid being judged. And I think that ties to the next reason, which is protecting the self-image. Right? Nobody wants to be seen as a bad person. Everybody wants to be seen as a good, well-hearted, trustworthy individual. So if me telling a lie or me telling the truth is going to impact that, well, then I'm much more likely going to tell a lie to keep that from happening. So that I can still look like I'm a good person. And then I think lastly is there's a fear of vulnerability. So if I tell the truth, maybe I get exposed as not as a good person. Maybe some of my flaws do get exposed. Well, if I lie, then maybe I have a more control over the situation, control over how the person looks at me, and then I also get to avoid having that tough conversation where maybe difficult emotions come out. So I think, again, the intent behind telling a white lie makes sense. However, I think oftentimes, while telling the truth might be uncomfortable and painful, telling a lie can also lead to more pain. Can also lead to having the person look at you a certain way because they found out that you did lie. So while telling the truth may feel therapeutic, I think in the long run, telling the truth is going to bear more fruits to your labor. I don't think that's a phrase. I think I just made it up. I'll probably mess it up, but that's fine. But I think you kind of get the point, right? So like telling a lie, yes, it may protect me in the short term, but it can lead to more long-term damage. So I think, what can you do in these moments instead of telling a white lie? It's obviously, hey, tell the truth, right? But I think for somebody, if it's a learned behavior, it's not going to be that simple. So I think one thing to think about is, and you can always just, before you speak and somebody asks you a question and you typically lie, take a deep breath. I think sometimes, since lying can be a defense mechanism, when someone asks us a question, boom, it's a reactionary response. I'm going to tell a lie to make sure this person doesn't view me a certain way. But maybe you do actually want to tell the truth. Maybe you do actually want to open that line of conversation. So I think something that can happen is taking a deep breath. It can kind of lower your heart rate, right? It can lower the stress level a little bit. It can also be used as like a quick pause to kind of gather your thoughts so that when you do tell the truth, it comes out the way you want it to come out. Um, I think something you can also do is ask yourself some specific questions, right? So asking yourself, how would lying impact this relationship? What would that do? You can ask yourself, how would telling the truth enhance this relationship? Even though it might be awkward and uncomfortable, what could I potentially gain from telling the truth in this context? But then I think the last question is maybe asking yourself, what sort of pushback might you receive from telling the truth? I think what this can do is help you plan your responses. Now, you're not going to be able to plan for everything, but maybe you have follow-up questions, maybe you have follow-up statements that kind of further add context to what it is that you're saying. I think another thing to think about too is, if I were to tell the truth and I were to be judged for this thing, is this somebody I want in my life? So I think sometimes when you do tell the truth, there's going to be that natural form of, I don't want to say judgment, but there's going to be a reaction from the other person, and I think that's natural. But if you feel like it's something that's not a big deal, and this person, you know, kind of judges you in a way that you don't like, well, maybe that this is a person you don't really want to have in your life. Now, that's probably to the extreme, but it's something to think about, because I think there's a lot of the reasons why we tell these white lies, and maybe that's one of them. One thing to kind of think about and consider. So there is the phrase that, the truth will set you free. So maybe you don't get the result you want from the conversation. Maybe you don't get the result you were looking for from telling the truth. But at the very least, it removes that burden that you may hold over yourself from telling that lie. And sometimes even that can be therapeutic in and of itself because you're not holding anything back. So that's what I have for you all today. Again, happy Monday. Hope the weekend was good. Hope the week starts off great for you. Don't forget to download the podcast, share it with your friends, like, rate, review, so we can continue to expand the audience, expand the message to everybody who needs to hear something related to the mental side, to kind of make sure that they're performing their best, to make sure they're being the best version of themselves. And don't forget, today's a great day to make an impact on someone's life. Right, y'all. Have a good one.